Hi, my name's Delphine, and my sister stole my boyfriend right out from under me during couples therapy. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how they made me question my sanity. How my own mother called me dramatic while handing the house to the woman who replaced me. How they smiled at family dinners I wasn't invited to, posted pictures in the backyard I grew up in, and quietly erased me from their group texts, their wedding guest list, and eventually, from the narrative. And all the while, she wore my grandmother's bracelet on her wrist like a trophy. What kind of family celebrates your disappearance while calling it love? What kind of sister does that and still gets away with it? They say the people who love you most are the ones who never betray you. I used to believe that, wholeheartedly, unquestioningly, like a child clutching a blanket with no doubt it would protect her from monsters. But what no one ever told me was that monsters can look like the people you sit across from at Sunday dinner. It all started in February, under one of those crisp Sacramento skies that made everything look clearer than it really was. The sun was bright, but the air had bite, like it knew what was coming and didn't care to warn me. I was 34, financially independent, working long hours at a mid-level finance firm, and emotionally exhausted from trying to keep a relationship alive that had long since stopped breathing on its own. Quentin, my boyfriend of almost 3 years, was the kind of man who made silence feel like your fault. He didn't yell, he didn't accuse, he just withdrew. Slowly, quietly, like sand slipping through your fingers before you even realized you were holding it. Then came the suggestion, framed like a gift, but wrapped in condescension. Over lunch at a cafe near her downtown office, my sister Isolde leaned across the table with that fake concerned smile she had perfected in college. "You two should really talk to someone," she said between bites of her kale salad. "I know someone great." I didn't respond right away. I just stared at her, fork paused mid-air, wondering when exactly she had decided to play therapist to my life. "You get so emotional, Dell," she added, as if that sealed the deal. "Quentin needs structure. He needs to feel heard." "And what about me?" I wanted to say, but I didn't, because some part of me still hoped she meant well. Some part of me wanted to believe the therapist she recommended, Malus, was a lifeline, not a trap. I made the appointment the next morning. Walking into Malus's office was like entering a neutral zone. Cream walls, beige furniture, the faint scent of lavender diffusing through the air. It looked safe, felt safe. Until she spoke, every question was directed at Quentin. "How do you feel when she does that? What's your reaction when things get tense?" When I tried to respond, she raised a hand gently, like a conductor guiding an orchestra, and said, "Let's let Quentin finish." By the end of that first session, I was already shrinking. By the third, I was folding into myself like laundry packed away for a season that might never return. Isolde kept checking in. "How's therapy going?" she'd ask with a glint in her eye that didn't match the tone of her voice. It wasn't curiosity, it was surveillance. Then Quentin said something one night over dinner that stuck with me longer than I expected. We were eating takeout, something from a Thai place down the street, and he looked at me, not unkindly, but distant. "She says I've been carrying too much," he said. "Maybe you're not ready for someone like me." That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling while his back faced me. That was when the shift happened, not in our relationship, but in my place within it. I started noticing the scheduling was done between him and Malus. I was no longer looped in on email confirmations. When I brought it up, Quentin told me I was over-analyzing things. "Some clients need more space to process," Malus said during one of our shorter sessions, without looking me in the eye. By session 4, I felt like furniture, present but not acknowledged. My words were becoming decorations for someone else's story. I started writing things down, quietly, notes in my phone, patterns in a journal. I remembered something Eleanor Roosevelt once said: "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." But what if they bypass consent altogether? What if they don't make you feel inferior? They just make you feel invisible. I didn't tell anyone about the journal. I didn't cry about it either. I documented, observed, calculated, like I was trying to prove to myself that I still existed in the relationship, that I hadn't imagined the erasure. The last straw came unexpectedly. We were leaving a session, Quentin walking ahead, Malis just behind him. I had stopped to grab my jacket, which had fallen off the coat rack. When I looked up, I saw her hand brush against his shoulder, a soft, familiar touch, casual but not professional. And in that second, something inside me went still. It wasn't the touch that hurt. It was the confirmation. I wasn't paranoid. I was just the last to know. I hadn't spoken a word in the car, not to Quentin, not to myself. The silence between us after that therapy session wasn't just tense, it was a decision. One neither of us said out loud, but both understood. I watched him glance at his phone as he climbed into the driver's seat, his fingers flicking through messages with mechanical ease. Mine stayed still in my lap. As we pulled out of the parking lot, I told him I'd drive myself home. He didn't argue. He didn't even ask why. So I stayed parked under the shadow of the maple tree, watching them, Quentin and Malis, talking just outside the entrance. The glow from the glass doors lit them softly. At first, it looked professional. 2 adults, 1 therapist, 1 client, finishing a session. Then Malis leaned in. Her hand, delicate and practiced, landed briefly on his shoulder. He laughed, quiet and relaxed, like he belonged in that moment far more than any moment with me. She turned, catching my eyes through the windshield. And she smiled, not warmly, not apologetically. It was small, restrained, victorious. It hit me harder than it should have. It wasn't the touch, it was the message. You don't matter anymore. That's what it said. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove away, my heart hammering, my hands cold, my world rearranging itself with every turn of the wheel. Days passed, not in grief, but in a kind of quiet alertness, like I was moving through fog and finally realized the road had shifted underneath me. I tried to shake it off, to hold on to some normalcy, so I figured I'd send my mom that casserole recipe she asked for a month ago. I opened our family group chat, where we shared everything from Thanksgiving photos to last-minute birthday reminders, except it was gone. I scrolled up, down, searched keywords, nothing. My stomach turned, not from panic, but from recognition. I texted my cousin, Elise. "Hey, did the family group chat get renamed or something?" Her reply came back almost instantly. "Oh, I think someone started a new one. Thought maybe you didn't want to be included right now?" I stared at that message like it had teeth. No one had said a word to me, not a single notification, not a, "Hey, just checking in," nothing. They didn't just leave me out. They moved on without acknowledging I was ever in it. Later that evening, Isolde texted me directly. "Hope you're doing okay. Let me know if you need to talk." That's all she said. No context, no apology, not even a flimsy excuse. I stared at that single sentence, trying to decipher the tone behind it. It wasn't concern, it was theater. Her way of looking gracious on the outside while slipping the blade cleanly under the table. She wanted to appear compassionate after she cut the cord, I thought. Classic. I didn't respond. What was there to say? A few nights later, I was on Instagram, half distracted while folding laundry, when I stumbled across a post from my aunt. It was a photo of a casual dinner at my mother's house, warm lighting, wine glasses half full, the same chairs I'd sat in growing up. And there they were, my mother, Isolde, Quentin, All smiles. I kept swiping. There were 4 more pictures from different angles, each one featuring people who used to text me, "Love you," at the end of calls. But I hadn't received an invite, not even a mention. I didn't miss the dinner. They missed the part where I mattered. Something in me settled after that. Not bitterness, but clarity. A different kind of pain. One that didn't beg to be soothed, but simply existed to remind me I'd finally seen things as they were. They've chosen her, I whispered to myself in the mirror that night. All of them. I sat on the edge of my bed, pulled out my phone, and stared at the faded icon of the old group chat, still visible in archived threads. I held my thumb over it for a long second, then deleted it, not out of anger, just out of alignment. Maya Angelou once said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." I hadn't. I gave them the second, the third, the fourth time. But now, I believed them. I turned off my phone, got into bed, and stared at the ceiling again. But this time, there was no racing mind, no replaying conversations. There was just resolve. They'd written me out of the story, but if they wanted me silent, they should have made me forget how to write. Truth doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it sneaks in through the back door, quiet, patient, waiting for you to sit still long enough to notice. That's how it came to me. Not with fireworks, with a photo. It was a rainy Sunday. Sacramento was soaked and slow. I hadn't planned on doing anything productive, just curled on the couch with a blanket and my laptop, avoiding the sting of family posts and pretending the silence between Quentin and me was simply a phase. I started cleaning out my photo archive, deleting duplicates, making space. It was a mindless task. Until it wasn't. There it was, tucked between 2 birthday shots from years ago. A brunch table, 4 women, champagne flutes, and a charcuterie board. And right there, seated beside Isolde, was Melis, my therapist, or rather, the woman who had pretended to be one. I stared at the image, my fingers frozen above the trackpad. Dated nearly 3 years ago. I wasn't in the photo. I hadn't even been at that brunch. I remembered that weekend well because Isolde had told me she was attending a branding mixer for a client's skincare launch. She said it would be boring. No plus ones, just business. She lied. I zoomed in on the image. Isolde's hand rested lightly on Melis's wrist, their bodies angled toward each other in that easy, familiar way. The caption read, "Recharging with my day ones." And just like that, my stomach flipped. Because suddenly, everything about therapy, the cold stares, the redirected questions, the feeling of being ushered out emotionally, made sense. It hadn't been bias. It had been betrayal. I needed confirmation, and I knew exactly who to ask. Lydia. She and I hadn't spoken in a while, but she'd been close with Isolde during college and often ended up at the same events, especially those self-congratulatory PR brunches. I messaged her the photo and asked, "Hey, do you remember this brunch?" She replied with a voice message, her tone breezy at first. "Oh yeah, that was the one in Midtown. Isolde brought that therapist friend of hers, Melis, I think. They were catching up the whole time, like they were besties. At one point, Melis said, 'I owe you for last time.'" Why? My grip on the phone tightened. I played that message 3 more times. Each repetition etched those words deeper into my bones. She wasn't just biased, I whispered to myself. She was planted. It felt like someone had dropped a match on the slow-burning suspicion inside me. I sat at my kitchen table for hours that afternoon, every detail of the past few months rushing back. The speed with which Melis had accepted us as clients, the ease with which Isolde had recommended her, how quickly Quentin had scheduled the first session. This hadn't been therapy. It had been a setup. I replayed the early sessions in my mind like crime scene footage. The questions that felt like they had answers preloaded. The nods toward Quentin that gave him a permission slip to judge me. The scripted language, her expressions. That moment she looked at me, not with neutrality, but with calculation. She wasn't just analyzing us. She was orchestrating. And I had walked in thinking I was the one getting help. No, this wasn't just my sister turning on me. This was a system. A quiet system that moved in whispers and recommendations, in brunches and subtle gestures, in knowing glances and family group chats I no longer had access to. I opened my laptop and created a new folder on my desktop. Title: Sequence of Manipulation. I dropped in the brunch photo, saved Lydia's voice memo, then opened a blank document and started listing dates, text messages, receipts. I wasn't gathering dirt, I was gathering truth. Because I'd learned something crucial. People dismiss pain, but they can't argue with patterns. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the blinking cursor. I didn't need revenge. I needed a record. Something undeniable. Something clear. This was never about therapy. This was about control. Sometimes you don't lose your voice. They just stop hearing it. I used to think the most painful thing in life was being told to shut up. But it turns out, being talked over, quietly ignored, or strategically excluded cuts deeper. And in my family, exclusion always came with a smile and a fresh pitcher of iced tea. A week after starting my sequence of manipulation file, I decided to test something simple. I sent a group text to the family: Mom, Isolde, 2 cousins, and our aunt from Modesto. Nothing dramatic, just, thinking of hosting a dinner next Sunday? Let's catch up. Let me know if that works. No replies, not even a thumbs up. 2 days later, I was scrolling through Instagram during my lunch break when I saw Isolde's post. A sunny, well-filtered brunch table. My mother, my aunt, both cousins. Isolde herself at the head of the table in a pastel dress. The caption read, "Family, the ones who never leave you." I stared at that photo for a long time, then screen captured it, dropped it into the evidence folder, and closed the app without even finishing my salad. That night, I called my mother. Not out of spite, just for clarity. She answered on the second ring, cheerful and clipped. "Hey, sweetheart, everything okay? Why didn't you respond to my dinner invite?" I asked directly. There was a pause, then a sigh. "Oh, Delphine, it's just been a busy week. You've been unpredictable lately, and with everything going on, Isolde just seems more centered." There it was, the handoff. Not just the dismissal, but the transfer of trust, loyalty, and standing. My mother, who once called me her emotional rock, now saw me as unstable. Too much. I didn't argue, I just said, "Got it," and hung up. Later that weekend, I helped Quentin clear out old devices from the hall closet. We were supposed to be organizing tech clutter, prepping for a Goodwill drop. I opened one drawer and found his old iPhone, dead, scuffed, but intact. "Anything still on this?" I asked. He shrugged. "Doubt it. Probably just voice memos and notes. You can wipe it." I didn't wipe it. That night, after he went to sleep, I plugged it in, waited for it to boot up, and started scanning through files. There it was. A voice recording labeled Session 3 Notes. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the play button. Then I hit play. Melis's voice filled the quiet of my living room. Calm, soft, disturbingly intimate. She lacks the emotional maturity to navigate adult partnership. "You're carrying her." My breath caught. I played it again and again. On the third listen, I grabbed a pen and started transcribing word for word. It wasn't the clinical tone that shook me. It was how casual she sounded. Like she wasn't analyzing, she was advising, encouraging, framing. That wasn't a session, that was scripting. And Quentin had kept this recording, not for insight, but maybe because a part of him liked hearing her affirm what he already believed. I flipped back through my journal, opened a new entry, and wrote, "They weren't helping him leave me. They were helping him frame me." The next morning, I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and looked at him across our now stale breakfast table. I found the recording. He didn't flinch, just blinked slowly, then shrugged. "It was just feedback, Dell. She was trying to help." "She told you I was emotionally immature," I said. "That you were carrying me." He leaned back in the chair, arms crossed. Maybe she wasn't wrong. My knuckles clenched around my mug. "You're not in a relationship, Quentin. You're in a script, and she's holding the pen." He scoffed. "You're being dramatic again." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly the line she used." I didn't say anything else. I picked up the phone, emailed the file to myself, and slid it back into the drawer. I wasn't going to destroy him, not yet, but I wasn't going to let him keep controlling the narrative either. That evening, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the journal I had started weeks ago, pages filled with moments, texts, phrases. But tonight, I wrote something different. A vow, not to fix, not to heal, but to finally speak loud enough to be heard. I used to want to fix things. Now, I just wanted the truth to echo louder than their excuses. If someone's comfort costs me my dignity, I'm no longer paying the price. That sentence had been playing on a loop in my head the entire week. It was like my own internal alarm system had finally gone off, and now I couldn't unhear it. I was done handing people the benefit of the doubt when they'd already cashed in their loyalty a long time ago. It was a Wednesday morning. I was half-dressed for work, oatmeal untouched, laptop open beside my coffee. I'd logged into LinkedIn to check a client referral when a tagged post popped up in the corner of my screen. A leadership summit. San Francisco. At the center of the photo, Quentin, seated beside Isolde, both wearing matching conference lanyards. She was angled toward him, his arm behind her chair. The caption read, "Power couple energy. We love to see it." I froze. 2 weeks ago, Quentin told me he was attending a solo development workshop. Something low-key, just to work on myself, he'd said, tapping the edge of his laptop while sipping green tea. He'd even said, "No networking, just internal stuff." That morning, staring at their faces framed by gold conference lighting, I learned what power couple meant in our story. It meant I was out. I didn't react right away. I didn't even finish breakfast. I closed the laptop, grabbed my keys, and drove to work in complete silence. But that night, when Quentin walked in and casually asked, "Did you get that report you were chasing?" I didn't wait. "I saw the post," I said, meeting his eyes. "The summit, you and Isolde." He blinked, paused, and then, with an insulting calmness, replied, "It was professional. She was invited last minute. It wasn't a big deal." That was it. Not even a hint of apology, no remorse. Just the smooth, confident indifference of someone who'd already rehearsed the line in his head. "There's no guilt in your voice," I said. "Just strategy." He didn't even flinch. The next 2 days were quiet, not because things were okay, but because he treated the moment like a traffic cone, something you swerve around and forget once it's behind you. Then came the box. I found it on my doorstep after work on Friday, cream-colored packaging, hand-tied ribbon. I carried it inside carefully, already sensing the venom beneath the polish. I peeled the tape and lifted the lid. A high-end bottle of champagne, the kind you only send when you want to send a message. The card inside read, "Some things sparkle more in the right hands." No name, But I didn't need one. The handwriting was Isolda's. I didn't cry. I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound that startled even me. "So this is her victory dance," I muttered. That night, I poured a glass of wine, not the champagne, and sat at my desk. I opened my laptop, pulled up Gmail, and typed 2 new messages, one to Isolde, one to Quentin. They were nearly identical. "You've both made your choices. I'll make mine. Do not contact me unless it involves formal resolution." I hit send, then sat there, letting the silence settle. It felt different this time, not heavy, not hollow, just clean. Then I went to my phone, deleted Quentin's number, archived Isolde's. It wasn't a purge out of rage, it was an inventory, removing what no longer belonged. Later that evening, I opened my browser again and searched for something I'd bookmarked but never pursued. A solo finance seminar in Austin. One I'd always told myself I was too busy for, or that it would be awkward going alone. Now, alone sounded like peace. I clicked register. Before submitting, I scrolled through their homepage and paused on a quote from Tony Gaskins. "You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate." I smiled, closed the tab, and felt more steady than I had in months. They thought they'd broken me into silence. But silence doesn't mean surrender. If they thought silence was surrender, they're about to learn the difference. There's a difference between leaving and being removed. One has dignity in its stride. The other leaves a bruise you can't see, but feel with every breath. Quentin asked to meet at a coffee shop in Midtown. He framed it like a check-in, said he wanted to talk somewhere neutral. I arrived 10 minutes early, took the booth against the wall, facing the door like I always did when I was bracing for something. He slid into the seat across from me, wearing that same calm face he used in therapy, level, rehearsed, void of tension. He didn't ask how I was. He just looked at his coffee and said, "I've been thinking about us." I didn't interrupt. I already knew. He lifted his eyes, voice even. "I don't think you're emotionally ready for what I need in a partner." It hit me like a quote I'd heard before. Because I stared at him, unblinking. He went on, parroting lines I remembered Melis using, word for word. It was less a breakup, more a performance. I imagined a cue card tucked under the table, a teleprompter behind my head. He paused only to sip, then added, "You react emotionally to things that require logic. I need more stability." I let him finish. I nodded slowly and said nothing, not because I had nothing to say, but because I wanted to remember every syllable, every phrase she had fed him like it was therapy, when really, it was training. He got up and left his half-full cup behind. Didn't hug me, didn't glance back. I sat there for a long time, long enough that the barista came to clear his side of the table, asked gently, "You okay, ma'am?" I smiled, tipped him extra, then whispered, "It wasn't a goodbye. It was an execution." On the way home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream in the car like some scene out of a dramatic movie. I just let my hands stay loose on the wheel, my eyes blank. When they rehearse your funeral before you're dead, they don't mourn you. They erase you. That night, I tried to log into the patient portal to download our session notes. I needed to see them, needed proof that I had, in fact, been present in this relationship, even if it had been reduced to a therapy timeline. But my login didn't work. I called the clinic. A young receptionist answered. "Sure, can I have your name?" "Delphine Carter," I said. She paused. I could hear the keyboard clicking. "I'm sorry. I don't have you listed here. Are you sure it was this practice?" "Yes, I was attending couples therapy with Quentin Carter." Another pause. "Okay, I do see Mr. Carter's file. But there's no secondary client listed." I hung up before she finished her apology. I wasn't just unimportant. I was undocumented, invisible. The next morning, I walked into the office, face steady, tone polite. I asked for a printout of any record under my name. The new assistant double-checked, even turned the monitor to show me. "I'm so sorry. There's no record here." I stared at the screen, at the blankness where my name should have been, and whispered, "I wasn't in therapy. I was in a performance." That afternoon, I opened a new folder on my desktop. Not a patient, not a pawn. Inside, I began filing away everything. Every receipt, calendar confirmation, email trail. The screenshots of session summaries Quentin forwarded to me when I wasn't included in the portal. Every text exchange about our schedules, time-stamped, categorized. I wasn't going to plead for recognition anymore. I was building proof. Later that evening, I opened a fresh document. The cursor blinked like a metronome on the blank screen. I typed, "Session timeline, evidence." Underneath it, goal, establish presence, pattern, exclusion. This wasn't about forcing someone to admit I mattered. It was about making sure no one could deny that I was there, even when they tried to write me out. Because the truth was, I may not have existed in their system. Now, but they were about to exist in mine. If they erased my name from their records, I'll write it in bold in their consequences. There's silence, and then there's exclusion disguised as silence. The former is empty, the latter is loud in all the ways that matter, just not with words. I was in Fresno for a client meeting when it happened. The meeting ended early, and I stopped for a quick coffee before the drive home. As I waited in line, I opened Instagram. Just a reflex. That's when I saw it, tagged in a photo posted by my cousin. A long table in the backyard of my mother's house. White chairs, string lights, wine glasses mid-toast. And at the center of it all, Isolde and Quentin, hand in hand. The caption, "Celebrating love where it all began." I tapped through the carousel. My aunt laughing with her head tilted back. My dad holding a glass of champagne, his arm around my mother. Cousins, neighbors, all there, all grinning like this was the most natural thing in the world. The same backyard where I used to help string those very lights every holiday. The same tablecloth my grandmother embroidered by hand. I wasn't just uninvited, I was erased. They didn't forget me. They chose not to remember. I stared at those faces, my fingers frozen on the screen, my chest tight. And then I saw it, the bracelet, zoomed in, just enough to make out the delicate gold chain on Isolde's wrist. It was our grandmother's. She'd passed it down to me when I was 19. I'd worn it for years, tucked it into my jewelry box every night. I thought I lost it when I moved out of the apartment after Quentin and I split. I'd searched every drawer, every bag, convinced I was just scattered. Now I knew where it went. She hadn't just taken my place in the family, she'd taken my heirlooms. I didn't call anyone, didn't text. Instead, I began saving everything, screenshots of the photos, timestamps, captions, comments. I wasn't angry in the way they probably imagined I'd be. I didn't pace the floor or break a dish or scream into a pillow. I was cold, precise, because this wasn't just a party. This was them writing their version of our family's story, one where I never existed. I opened my laptop and pulled up the document I'd been quietly building for weeks. The evidence timeline. Photo, Isolde wearing the bracelet, timestamped 2 months after I moved out. Text, Isolde's message to Mom about cleaning up the guest room. Dated the weekend the bracelet disappeared. Comment thread, my cousin replying, "So happy for you both." The same cousin who ghosted my dinner invite weeks earlier. They wanted their version of history? Fine, I'd show them the receipts. Later that night, I poured myself a glass of wine and scrolled back to the image of Isolde at the party. There she was, perfectly framed under the patio lights, smiling wide, eyes proud, and the bracelet gleaming on her wrist. She smiled like she'd won. But I wasn't playing to win anymore. I was playing to end the game. A family can become a courtroom where you're always the defendant, no matter how much evidence you bring. And when love becomes leverage, silence is the gavel they drop. The text came on a Wednesday morning. It was short and vague, like most things from my mother these days. "We need to talk as a family. Come this weekend." No subject line, no pleasantries. I knew exactly what it was. By Saturday morning, I was back in Fresno. I parked at the edge of the driveway so I could leave quickly if I needed to. A habit now. Inside, the living room looked staged, like it was set up for a realtor walkthrough, not a family discussion. The lighting was soft, too many scented candles for such a tense gathering. Quentin and Isolde were already seated, side by side on the couch like co-chairs at a conference. My mother motioned toward the empty armchair across from them. "Sit, sweetheart," she said. No one hugged me. No one met my eyes. The moment I sat down, my mother launched right in. "We're all just worried about how stuck you seem." I almost laughed, but I didn't. "We know things have been tense," she continued, her voice carefully measured, "and we thought it might be helpful to talk openly." "Is that what this is?" I asked, looking from face to face. "Open," Isolde chimed in, faux gentle. "You've been distancing yourself, Del. We're just trying to include you again." I blinked at her, slowly, like I was counting how many lies she could fit into a single sentence. "You included me by planning an engagement party at Mom's house without telling me? Wearing Grandma's bracelet like it was always yours?" Isolde didn't flinch. "Del, come on. That bracelet was just mixed up during the move." "And the photos online, the captions about family, the choice to celebrate in a place you knew I'd associate with home?" Silence. That's when Mom leaned in. "We're not here to fight. We're here to move forward." "By pretending nothing happened?" I asked, my voice low, steady. "Delphine," she sighed, as if I was the child misbehaving in a grocery store. "We've gone ahead and put Isolde's name on the deed." It landed like a punch I saw coming but still couldn't block. The house. My childhood home. The one she and Dad always said would be mine because I was the one who cared about legacy, about roots. The one where Dad and I spent every spring planting tomatoes in the backyard while Mom watched from the window with a mug of coffee. "We thought it would make transitions easier," she added, like she was talking about changing utility companies, not rewriting a will. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream, to demand to know when, how, why. But all I said was, "When?" Mom hesitated. "A few months ago." I turned to Isolde, whose smile was subtle but unmistakable. "It just made the most sense, Del," she said, tilting her head. "You're hardly ever here." There it was, the sentence that said everything. It wasn't just the house they gave her. It was the throne. I stood, slowly, deliberately. My chair scraped against the hardwood floor, and for the first time in that room, everyone flinched. I gathered my coat, slid my purse strap over my shoulder. "If this is what inclusion looks like," I said, "then I'll take exile." No one followed me as I walked out. Outside, the air was cooler than I remembered. I paused at the end of the driveway, turned once to look at the house. It looked smaller. Or maybe I'd just outgrown the weight they tried to keep me under. I got in the car, turned the engine, and whispered to myself before pulling away. They thought this was the end of my story, but they just titled my next chapter. History has a habit of repeating itself, especially when no one checks the record. And in my family, no one ever did. They let silence pass for harmony and called complicity love. It was a quiet Monday when the message came in. I was working from home, sifting through expense reports, when the notification popped up on my phone. Instagram. A direct message from someone named Nina L. The first sentence made my chest tighten. I saw what's happening. I knew your sister in college. She did the same to me. I opened the rest immediately. She introduced herself briefly, said we didn't know each other, but we had a mutual problem. She'd seen Isolda's engagement photos, recognized Quentin's name, connected the dots, and couldn't keep quiet. We scheduled a Zoom that evening. I cleared my dining table, poured myself tea, and waited. Nina appeared on screen, early 40s, sharp-eyed, controlled. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She started dating my ex while she was pretending to help me process the breakup, she said flatly. Told me to go to therapy. Even recommended her friend, a therapist who fed everything I said back to him. I felt the hairs on my arms rise. She shared screenshots, texts between her and Isolda, nearly identical to the ones I had saved. Phrases like, "He needs someone more emotionally consistent," and "You're strong, but maybe too intense for him right now." Emails, photos, even a voice memo of her therapist excusing Isolda's closeness with her ex. It was my story, told years earlier. Different names, same script. This wasn't just betrayal, I whispered after the call ended. It was rehearsal. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the shock, but because the pattern was finally in focus. Isolda didn't just destroy relationships, she branded herself the survivor in them. And the world applauded. The next morning, it got worse. I logged onto Facebook and saw a new post by Isolda. 10 photos arranged like a memoir cover. Her and Quentin walking hand in hand, cooking together, posing in the backyard I used to call home. Caption: Healing isn't linear. Sometimes it begins with letting go of the people you thought were your forever, even if they're family. My breath stopped mid-inhale. The comments were flooding in. So proud of you for speaking your truth. You're so strong. I've been there too. Family can be the most toxic. I didn't reply, didn't drop any truth bombs. I just opened my folder and saved every screenshot. Then I dragged Nina's files into a new subfolder, Framing Reputation Manipulation. Let her have her moment, I thought. I'm preparing the truth. That night, I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Dr. Reyes, my old college therapist. She had retired, but I remembered her email and sent a simple message. "Do you remember Isolda Carter?" She responded within an hour. We spoke the next day over the phone. Her voice was familiar, steady, no nonsense. "Of course I remember Isolda," she said. "She always had a way of shaping the room. You weren't the first to lose your voice around her." I didn't cry. I didn't ask for stories. I didn't need them. I just sat there, absorbing the final confirmation. This wasn't new. This wasn't mine alone. It was a legacy of manipulation dressed as charm, concern, sisterly love. Every story she told about me was stitched from lies, and I was about to pull the thread. You can only swallow silence for so long before it turns into a scream. I wasn't looking for destruction anymore. I was done hoping for apologies. All I needed now was exposure. Let them see the truth. Let it play out where everyone could witness the performance. And finally, see the script. I found out the wedding date through a mutual friend who still hadn't unfollowed me out of decency. September 2nd, Fresno. The backyard of a family friend turned private venue with catered hors d'oeuvres and a rented string quartet. Isolde, of course, wouldn't dare send me an invitation. She probably assumed I'd never find out. But I didn't need to attend. I just needed my message to. I called Marcus, an old college friend who now ran AV for high-end events, told him I needed a discrete projector, synced to a timed file, delivery set up through a dummy vendor. I didn't use my name, I used the wedding planners. Can you cue it during the montage? I asked. He whistled low over the phone. That's savage, Dell. But yeah, 90 seconds is all you'll need if it's clean. It was clean. I spent nights fine-tuning the footage. First frame, a black screen with white letters fading in. This is what happened while I was silent. Then Melis's voice, lifted directly from Quentin's phone. Calm, steady, impossible to misinterpret. She lacks emotional maturity. He's carrying her. The screen flashes. She was never registered as a patient, just a prop. Screenshots of session emails, timeline overlays, a closing line in my own handwriting scanned from a notebook. When they rewrite your life, make sure you keep a copy. The morning of the wedding, I stayed home, I cleaned my apartment, did laundry, made lasagna, normal things. There was no satisfaction in destruction, just anticipation for the reckoning that truth brings. Marcus texted me 2 hours later. It played. Room went dead quiet. Groom left. Isolde froze. Some guests clapped. You good? I didn't reply right away. I just poured myself a glass of wine, sat cross-legged on my couch, and played the file again from my laptop. This time, just for me. I smiled. For the first time, it felt real. That wasn't revenge. That was rescue. From my own silence. By sunset, the internet had caught fire. Isolde's Instagram comments were locked. Quentin's profile disappeared entirely. Melis's clinic listed temporarily closed on Google. A few people DM'd me. Some were vague. I had no idea. Others were precise. I'm sorry for believing her. My aunt even sent an email. I didn't know the extent of it. I wish I had asked more questions. Too late, but noted. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That night, I renamed the folder on my desktop. From sequence of manipulation to record closed. I clicked through each document, each photo, one final time. And then I did something I hadn't been able to do in years. I closed the folder. Not because I was done, but because I had finally been her. Letting go doesn't mean losing. Sometimes it's how you win. That's what I wrote in my journal the morning after the wedding video played. The apartment was quiet. My inbox had exploded overnight, yet my mind felt strangely still. I sat in my kitchen sipping cold brew and rereading old entries, the ones where I begged the universe for a sign, something to prove I wasn't crazy, that what I felt was real. Now I had my answer. But what hurt the most, in the end, wasn't the betrayal. It was the time I had spent twisting myself into versions they might finally love. All those years, trying to earn space in a family that decided long ago who belonged and who didn't. My phone rang once that week. It was my mother. I answered, mostly out of curiosity. She didn't mention the video, not once. You always were a bit theatrical, Delphine, she said flatly, like she was talking about an old school play I'd overcommitted to. You've got a flair for drama. It wasn't an apology. It was a final insult dressed as normalcy. I let her talk, and then I hung up. No one else called, not Isolde, not Quentin, not a single cousin. The silence felt like a vacuum at first, so loud in its nothingness. But as the days passed, it stopped feeling empty. It started to feel clean. I wasn't abandoned. I was free. A few days later, I met Uncle Alaric for coffee downtown. He was the only one who had stayed neutral during the entire circus. He never took sides, just watched quietly, like someone who had learned to survive by avoiding the storm altogether. We sat at a small cafe near the Capitol. I stirred my cup as he looked me in the eye. "What you did wasn't to destroy them," he said. "It was to protect yourself. That takes more strength than revenge." I didn't speak. I didn't have to. "I always saw the way they treated you," he continued. "I just never felt it was my place to interfere." "It never is," I said, smiling faintly. "Until you realize silence has a body count." He nodded slowly. That conversation became something I didn't know I needed. He didn't offer to fix anything, and I didn't ask him to. But for the first time, someone in the family acknowledged the imbalance and didn't flinch when I didn't back down. The next week, I enrolled in the Women's Financial Empowerment Conference in Austin. It was something I'd bookmarked 2 years earlier and told myself I wasn't ready for. Now, I wasn't just ready. I was built for it. I updated my LinkedIn, started a public journal online titled Gaslight Notes, Reclaiming the Narrative. I wrote short entries, stories without names, snapshots of emotional manipulation in professional, personal, and family systems. Each one gained quiet traction. I never needed their approval. I needed my own permission. One morning, I got an email from Maya, a second cousin I hadn't heard from in years. Subject line, "Thank you." The body read, "I believed her." Until I saw how you responded, quietly, powerfully. "Thank you for showing the rest of us we can speak up too." I read it twice, then archived it. Not out of disregard, but because I wanted to keep it. A reminder that not all silence is equal. Some silence is waiting, some is survival, some is strength. While cleaning my closet, I found an old photo I used to hate. Thanksgiving at our house, maybe 15 years ago. I looked so out of place, arms crossed, half smile, standing slightly away from the group. Back then, I thought that meant I didn't belong. Now, I framed it, not as nostalgia, but as proof. I was always there. They just chose not to see me, and that no longer made me small, that made me visible to myself. Closure isn't a door shutting. It's the window I finally opened. The best revenge isn't loud, it's when they realize you never needed them to win. I didn't feel victorious the day after the wedding. I felt still. There were no fireworks, no sense of celebration, just a deep and steady quiet that came from knowing I had finally stopped explaining myself. For the first time in years, the story no longer belonged to them. Within a week, the therapy board reached out. I had submitted my statement with attached evidence, session transcripts, the audio clip, and a copy of the invoice that never listed me as a client. The investigator asked for a Zoom interview. I joined from my kitchen table, hair pulled back, legal pad by my side. She asked if I had anything to add beyond the documentation. I took a breath. "The damage wasn't in the advice," I said. "It was in the manipulation." She nodded. That was it. That night, I wrote 2 letters, one addressed to Isolde, the other to Quentin. I didn't sign them. I didn't even date them. I just printed them out, sealed them in envelopes, and dropped them in the mail. No return address. The letter read, "You broke a bond I never agreed to rebuild. You constructed a version of me that was easier to blame than understand. And now you're left with that fiction. I will not explain myself again. This is my last word." 2 days later, I landed in Austin. The air was warm, buzzing with late summer heat. I checked into the downtown hotel where the Women's Financial Empowerment Conference was held. My name was on the speaker list, closing keynote. The room was full, rows of women, some in business suits, others in jeans and t-shirts. looked up at me as I stepped onto the stage. My slides were simple, my voice steady. I didn't mention names, didn't need to. I spoke about how financial control often masks emotional manipulation, how the same power structures that silence women in boardrooms also silence them at dinner tables. I ended with this. When people tell you your pain is exaggerated, document it. When they say you're imagining things, show them the patterns. And when they try to erase you, build something they can't ignore. They stood, some clapped, some cried, and I walked off that stage free. The next morning, I packed my rental car and left Austin. Instead of heading home, I made one last detour through Fresno. Not to see anyone, not to settle anything. I just wanted to see it, the house. I drove past it slowly. The garden looked smaller. The porch paint was fading. Isolde's car was in the driveway. I didn't stop. They gave her a house, I whispered, pulling away. I built a life. Back in Sacramento, I signed the lease on a new office space. It wasn't big, just a studio suite above a coffee shop, but it was mine. I named it Third Voice Consulting, a space for women navigating divorce, family estrangement, workplace silencing. Within a week, I had 10 bookings. Within a month, I had a waiting list. On the day I moved in, I carried one thing that didn't belong to the new space, a small velvet box. Inside was the bracelet, my grandmother's. I had found it left in a box of old silverware, likely tossed aside during the move. Isolde probably thought she'd buried it in forgetfulness. I mounted it in a shadow box and pinned it above my desk, not because I missed her, but because it reminded me of everything they thought I would never reclaim. I lost the bracelet. I didn't lose my story.